come as no surprise to you that you are the most marketed to generation in human history. Advertising is ubiquitous in our day and age. And your attention is the most coveted commodity on the face of the earth. TikTok, the video sharing app on your phones and on the internet, right, what your great-grandkids use, right? It spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year trying to increase your attention span from 3 seconds to 4 seconds. All right, just one of your 86,400 seconds each day. Oh, that doesn't work on me, Pastor. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. H-E-B, Walmart, Brookshire, Exxon, Buc-ee's, 7-Eleven, even Texas Lotto and more, as well as all the individual brands within each one of those stores, spends billions of dollars a year to find the perfect product placement of every of the 100,000 or more items just to get your attention so you'll buy one more, and then one more next time. And it's not just the physical products in the physical store. Everything you listen or watch is marketed to you for that attention. On Netflix at our house, we have just one profile for the whole family, right? So all kinds of stuff, right? But I'm always impressed when Netflix can find a category that's filled with movies and shows that I'm interested in. Something like witty, irreverent action shows that settle old scores with explosions. Great. But guess what? I don't watch most, if any of them. Well, how come? Well, just like you, I'm bored with the constant amusement. Ennui is the word that means this sort of distracted, dissatisfied weariness. And the great Lutheran philosopher Soren Kierkegaard would call this the despair of necessity and the despair of possibility. That is, we feel stuck between a grinding resignation in everyday life and an empty, endless scroll of choices, like your Facebook feed or Netflix suggestions, or even 42 kinds of toothpaste at the store. And as Americans, we somehow think that this is freedom and Christianity. And then all we can say for ourselves is, It's probably the hardest one yet in our sermon series about judgment. And why judgment? Why a series about judgment? Well, because we say it every week. We believe that Jesus will come again to judge the living and the dead. Right? It's simply wishful thinking that we all get to go to the big golf course, the fishing hole, the deer blind, the shopping mall, the coffee class, the jam session, the quilting bee, the swap meet, or whatever it is in the sky with pie and the sweet by and by, right? And wishful is really the politest thing we can say about that. I mean, Kierkegaard really has us pegged right between Scylla and Charybdis, between the frying pan and the fire, the rock and the hard place, on the horns of a dilemma, the ancient Greeks called it. Well, what's the least bad option, we might ask, trying to differentiate and sort things out? Kierkegaard has us nailed, not merely in our everyday lives, but our religious lives too. Remember those two poles he describes, right? Necessity and possibility. All the have-tos and all the would-be, could-be, and should-bes. When we hear a Bible story like today's parable or teaching story from Jesus, we wonder, what more does God want from us? Look, God, we grumble. We've already mumbled our prayers. We already checked into worship. Most of us even said pastor's dumb opening, unto ages of ages, amen. All right. We're going to stay after this one Sunday to eat the meal. God, when are you going to give us credit for all the other things we could be, would be, or should be doing? No, we're here for you. And then we sit through one more sermon, like we always do, Every time we wait for pastor to babble on about forgiveness, life, and salvation, or maybe grace, mercy, and love this time, and of course, everyday life. Meh. So we end up like the 5 foolish bridesmaids. We thought we had enough, but then we left in search for more. We looked all over. Sports games, going out to brunch, sleeping in, watching TV, going to work, something with the kids at school. But eventually, either necessity or possibility dragged us back into church, and even though the building's doors were open for our bodies, the door for our thoughts and feelings, for our hearts and minds, the door for our spirits or souls remained firmly shut, while a distant voice told us in our mind, "Who dis? I don't know you." On the one hand, this story from Jesus seems kind of like a dumb premise, right? Who's ever been to such a foolish wedding? And I've been to more wedding ceremonies than most of you. And I've seen them with lots of attendance. I've seen them delayed by late arrivals. I've seen fancy processions in and out. However, trying to really fit the wedding customs, ancient and modern, really trying to figure all that out misses the point. And just to summarize Jesus' story, right? Remember they didn't have clocks and watches, and everybody walked everywhere back in those days, right? So sometimes you just had to wait. But anyway, what is Jesus' point? Well, it's not about careful preparation, right? That's what we might think. It's not about careful preparation, but rather it's what Stephen Covey memorably phrased as the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Which, if you missed it in the story, is the groom, right? Which symbolizes Jesus. See, everything else flows from that one thing, from keeping Jesus as the main thing in our faith together and our life together. Just like Deuteronomy chapter 6, we'll paraphrase. Keep Jesus, who I'm telling you about today, in your heart. Tell about him to your children and talk about him when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise. Everything flows from Jesus. Jesus is the one who rescues us from that bondage to endless necessity and empty possibility. Even in the parable, the bringing of enough oil just in case is rooted in, it flows from, it grows out of keeping the groom, right? Keeping Jesus the main thing. And if we were to sit and brainstorm down here, right? Or if we were downstairs with a big whiteboard, right? What would we include as things that we think bring us enough oil? No doubt we'd say things like doctrine and confirmation, right? Learning, knowing, even reciting the correct things about God and our faith. We'd probably write down our feelings, our self-identity, right? The sense that we have that we're Christians. Being able to think about ourselves and our connection with God, how it makes us feel about telling others that we're Christian, how the music or the building makes us feel. Maybe we'd add to that list amusement or novelty, a sense of looking for, even finding something new and different, the latest post or book from a favorite blogger or author. What song will we sing? What theme will the sermon have? What topics can we study next time? And so on. Surely we'd include on the list our morals, that we're good people. We pay our taxes, we raise our kids, we don't go to jail. Right? We'd mention our scruples, our casuistry, all of the, well, I never, and all the rationalizations, our integrity and ethics. And as good and important as all those things are, on their own, it's all, See, they only provide us enough oil, like the foolish bridesmaids. They restrict us always to what was, the way Jesus was, where he was, never quite getting us to who Jesus is, let alone who he will be. And even if you do them all, there's still not enough to keep our lamps lighted while we wait for Jesus to come again to judge the living and the dead. A change in perspective is needed. We've got to change from, well, let's get Jesus done, right? Even if he's the first and most important thing, let's get him done so that we can move on. That is, making Jesus into a milestone, a waypoint, a road marker an accomplishment, or an achievement. Right, that's what those earlier examples from a moment ago do. We need to change it from that to a question. If Jesus, then what? What's needed? What's next? What trade-offs must I make? What do I anticipate and expect will happen? What will make me ready for what God will do next? Get action, urges Teddy Roosevelt. And it's here we find the fuel to keep our lamps lit, to keep our engines running, to keep our batteries charged. This way of faith in everyday life generates that spiritual energy for us rather than simply consuming it. See, those things that we listed a moment ago, right? Our morals, what we think about ourselves, all that kind of stuff, right? When they become their own purpose, they're enervated, right? The energy, the strength, the vigor gets drained out of them. When we attempt to preserve and save them, to put them up on a pedestal in our mental museums, they just dry out and crumble. But when they're a track record of everything God has done for us already, when they're proof of God's action in everyday life, when they help us find our bearings and point us back to God, then they make us ready. Right? Thanksgiving's coming up, right? We're going to have a Thanksgiving meal here. We got Thanksgiving coming up in a week. So imagine for a moment if you had decided only to use last year's leftovers from now on. All right? Not just the food, but everything. The place settings, the guests, the clothes, the TV shows, right? And at least the Cowboys will have won for you, right? All you Cowboys fans. But not just that, but even the thoughts and the memories. That sounds ridiculous, right? And you and I know eventually all of it get used up, and then, well, you just be trapped forever in that one memory moment. It would stand as a judgment against you, locking you out of the present and out of the future. Or last year's Thanksgiving could make you ready for this year, as it stands as one more proof or testimony or experience of what Thanksgiving is and will be. The expectation that Jesus' parable calls us to is not the scouting motto, be prepared. Nor is it a call for a bunch of redundant systems, nor is it an excuse to lug around a bunch of spiritual junk just because we might need it someday. It's much more like the Israelites in the wilderness with the pillar of cloud and fire ahead of them. It's Mary Magdalene running to tell the apostles the risen Jesus is on his way to meet them. Time and time again, we've seen God break into everyday life with his not of this world grace, mercy, and love. And he'll do it again and again and again until that last day when he breaks in fully and completely. To ignore his warning, to expect his imminent arrival, to say, meh, to what he's going to do next, is to miss it while we're out doing something else. Then to be left out while he does something else without us. Instead, when we see God's perfect record of action, it prompts us to get action. As we anticipate, we expect God to come and connect with us in everyday life. Amen.